Hi, I'm Bruce Scheer, and you're listening to A Shark's Perspective.
Welcome back, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. I'm Kenneth Kinney, but friends call me Shark. I am a keynote speaker, a strategist, a shark diver, host of this show, and your chief shark officer. When you introduce a new product, service, or solution, what are the costs you're expending? I mean, after all, there are the dollars, and most CFOs, banks, or investors don't lend twice for any do-overs. What about the space that story takes up in someone's mind? There's a lot of traffic there too, so it's not like people are waiting for you to refine it. Most brand market stories are not afforded a second look. With all the costs being literally and figuratively expended, then how do you inspire your buyers with a go-to-market story that sizzles? Bruce Scheer is a professional speaker and president of NSA Northwest, a CEO of a consultancy, and the author of Inspire Your Buyers, Go to Market with a Story That Sizzles. And on this episode, we will discuss living and studying overseas, a story that sizzles, messaging frameworks, the narrative imperative, trick questions with solutions, problems, and outcomes, the big solution and the path to change, developing a set of prescribed next steps, communicating your narrative through simple, unforgettable visuals, the big solution and a path to change, aligning teams, Shark GPT, and a lot more. So let's tune into a CEO who takes a walk with this podcast, with a shark who of course takes a swim on every episode of this podcast. So let's dive into this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Bruce, welcome to A Shark's Perspective, if you will. Tell us a little bit about your background and your career to date.
Oh, thanks, Shark. Yeah, it's wonderful to be on your show. It's one of my favorites that I actually listen to, and I've got a list. I walk every morning, 10,000 steps, and I love coming into your show. I always learn something and great takeaways, and a host second to none. So, Shark, just a bit about my background. I'm a CEO of
You're a professional liar.
Yeah.
But thank you for the compliments.
Yeah. So anyway, CEO of InspireYourBuyers.com. So that's a consultancy firm that helps organizations get their story straight and very much into revenue enablement. We'll partner with organizations to kind of bring it and help them accelerate revenue growth for some of the largest organizations in the world, and scale ups and every now and then a startup or two. So that's on the business side. I love doing community service, and this is my year to be president of National Speakers Association Northwest. And that's been a lot of fun, Shark. We're on our way to doubling our membership. So kind of applying some of these principles, even in the not-for-profit world of the National Speakers Association. Redid the website and working on our value proposition. Just recently, Shark, we formed the West Coast Alliance, and that's 5 chapter presidents, including myself, up and down the West Coast, making sure that all our members can attend each other's sessions. So instead of just like one thing a month, now you got like 5. So that's been exciting. So just my background, though, is I'm kind of born and bred in Oregon, went to University of Oregon, studied all over the world. I call University of Oregon my credit brokerage house. They were good for me both as an undergrad and a grad. And lived in Asia for 10 years, frequent Europe all the time. So I do a lot of international work. And I just kind of landed into, this one domain. I call it the cherry on the top for me. I just love it. But it's helping organizations get their story straight. And I typically work with business leaders and revenue leaders to do that, and then, scale that with their teams, their sales and marketing and product teams.
Where all of you lived all over. I think you studied overseas as well.
I did. Yeah. I went to University of Copenhagen, lived in Denmark for a bit. Hawaii was like a foreign country for me, Shark, back in the mid 80s, went to UH Manoa for a while. Again, U of O was my credit brokerage house. Cornell, spent time over there. And then I didn't stop doing education. I represented University of California, Berkeley management education in Asia Pacific for quite a while as well. So I just kind of continued. I'd bring profs in, and I'd go act like a student and enjoy them, both the dinners before they were on stage, and then I'd be a student in the room as well. So I love learning.
Well, I had a chance to read your great book, Inspire Your Buyers, Go to Market with a Story That Sizzles. What inspired you to write the book, and who was your initial target for it?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's kind of my story, if you would, of helping business leaders over, 20 years go to market successfully. One of my old bosses told me, you can't afford to go to market twice. It's way too expensive, and time goes by. You lose an opportunity. And so that was ingrained in me a long time ago. And just thankfully, I've been able to do that practice working with business leaders and go-to-market teams across HP, Microsoft, SAP, et cetera, go to market with a new product, new solution. I call them big bets, Shark, where my client has made a huge investment in going to market with, product investment, partnerships investment in building out teams. And gosh darn it, they typically blow it as it comes to going to market with a story that sizzles. So my target audience is CEOs and revenue leaders and entrepreneurs. I get a lot of entrepreneurs reading this and loving it, just because it helps them get their thinking oriented in the right way to build their go-to-market story.
Well, you focus a lot on the narrative and the story, and something I was thinking about, and you said it right there with entrepreneurs. I mean, people that are, at least in some startups, but the win of when you come into a company obviously will change where you fix the narrative that exists with that company. When it's an entrepreneur, often it's early on and it's a little bit of a blank slate versus, you mentioned SAP or some big company like that. If you go in to consult with them, changing that narrative is a lot different. So I'm curious if you can yes. add any insight as to what you see when you do this, that is kind of the when you take a look at their narrative.
Absolutely, Shark. And for the listening audience, I just need to mention, I still have a pretty good full head of hair, but I have lost some, especially as it relates to some of those bigger organizations like SAP, et cetera.
Well, the more you listen, the grayer it gets, just like mine.
Yeah. But the hair loss, especially for some of these bigger organizations, is when you're designing a story, a go-to-market story, there are lots of opinions, and that gets amplified in bigger organizations. And every now and then I'll even have a wizard behind the curtain come out and go, hey, you got to change that. And it's like, what? We're already a couple months down the road here and you want to make changes. Oh boy. And again, like my boss said, you can't afford to go to market twice. And the tax is so heavy. But anyways, sorry, you gave me some PSTD or whatever,
PTSD yeah.
around working with my bigger clients and the opinions that surround them. But one big winner, Shark, on all this as you're designing your story that sizzles is focus on the buyer. That's the opinion that matters the most. And that's typically like when a marketing director goes, hey, Bruce, here's our brand guide. Follow this. I'm like just going, have you tested this with our target buyers for this particular solution that we're betting the farm on? Well, no, not really. And I go, yeah, I didn't think so. So let's not focus on internal opinions and insular thinking. Let's develop a narrative and go test that with our target buyers. And that opinion matters the most. That's what drives revenue growth, that buyer back perspective that I really drive towards with the teams that I serve.
Well, and that also, you said internal, the internal voices, that can include external agencies. Because in any bigger organization where there's, say 20 agencies working with them, it doesn't matter if they have nothing to do with brand messaging. They will make certain that they let you know what their opinion is and complicate the matter more. And until they start to align that message with whatever the true narrative and story is, it becomes a jumbled mess to your customers.
Yeah, Shark, I won't mention client by name, but they are a top fintech provider. And they had an agency that they engaged to work on their messaging platform, their messaging framework. And they also engaged me and my team, and it was really wild. I met with the agency, leader, owner, and 3 times, and I gave them the framework I needed, which is in the book that I sent to you, around how to design a story that sizzles. And I said, hey, whatever you guys do, I know you're going to do your messaging framework and do what you normally do, but is there any way that you could help me in my job? I need to build a narrative that sizzles. And I gave them the structure and reiterated that 3 times. Did I get that structure back from them? Hell no. Yeah, I literally didn't. I got the typical messaging map and some, very intelligent, well put together, message bites, but I did not get the story. And so I had to, kind of irritate my client and do additional work. Hey, we already did all these interviews with the agency. What are you doing? And I'm like, well, sorry, guys, we didn't get the answer we needed. So kind of had to do some redo on that to get the narrative straight. And so far, they're doing really, really well with it. So very often I try to leverage, the branding work, the agency work, gosh, there's internal people in the organization that cook up stuff too. I typically talk to all the best sellers and say, hey, send me all your stuff. And that's completely different than anything that marketing has done. And so I get immersed in this, and then we start to craft, a narrative that's going to work really well for them.
So tell us a little bit about what is the narrative imperative?
The narrative imperative? Geez, if you don't have a killer narrative, a narrative that sizzles, my gosh, you're leaving money on the table. And chances are you're going to take everybody down a rat hole and have a whole lot of no fun. And when you have a great narrative, I'm telling you, all boats rise. You do a great job of execution around that narrative, and that's why I typically work with the sales team, the marketing team, and the product team to really align with that narrative, where we can put all the wood behind that arrow and really go to market with impact. And when you do that, it's more profitable. The owners love it. And everybody involved with it's just having a better experience, getting better results. That, to me, is the narrative imperative. And sadly, many organizations didn't get the memo. They still don't have it. And there's a lot of opportunity out there to get this right. Hence the reason for the book, Shark.
Well, I want you to tell us a little bit about your trick question that you've tried to get me on before.
Okay. Yeah, my typical trick question. And I came to this question having a big argument with a president that I was serving. So the trick question is, what are you selling at the end of the day, Shark? Are you selling a solution, a problem, or an outcome? At the end of the day, what are you selling?
Oh, I'm not doing the pull my finger, because you've basically gotten me on this before. So go ahead and explain this to the audience.
So the answer is, as Shark had rightly pointed out, it's a trick question. You're at the end of the day, to sell something, I argue you have to sell all 3. It's not just one, it's all 3. And then the next part of my trick question is, if I have agreement there, yeah, Bruce, you're right. You do need to sell all 3. Now, in what order do you sell them to get a buyer to buy? And that's also, I see people squirm when I ask that question, Shark.
So how did you come about looking at it that way?
My clients teach me. They pay me to learn from them. And I got into this big fight with one of my clients, a president. He wanted to sell the solution, and we were putting together a booth for him for a trade show that he wanted to go to. And I wanted to lead with the problem on that booth, and he wanted to lead with his branding, his name, and the solution. And sadly, his brand was just nothing. Nobody knew that brand. It was, just a total no-name brand. So, why would you lead with that? That's not going to get attention. They hadn't invested their millions and billions in building a brand, not at all. And but that's where he wanted to go, and I go, no chance. We really got to lead with the problem. So funny enough, he brought me into that thinking through that debate. Then I had to prove myself. And have you heard of a guy named Daniel Kahneman? In his book Thinking Fast and Slow, really wonderful. But he coined and did a lot of research behind prospect theory and loss aversion. And that's beautiful work, Shark, because it really proved my case that if you want to disrupt a buyer status quo and get them interested in true change, not just interested, but willing to take action, you really need to break their paradigm and disrupt their status quo thinking. And the number one way to do that is leading with the problem. That's the biggest motivator to get someone to want to change. People hate pain and problem, and they want to move away from that. The second most powerful element to get a prospect to change, to truly desire that change and take action, is to take them into the promised land, the land of gain. And that's the land of outcome. What does life on the beach look like when we've been successful, when we've had a successful change? What's that look like? So that's number two in Bruce's framework, if you would. Lead with the pain and the problem, and then make sure you've nailed that before you move on. Next, you move on to to envisioning the outcome with that prospect, so they can see what life looks like when they've been successful, and what's their personal gain in that situation. And then if you've got agreement there, and if you've anchored there, then and only then do you talk about solution, but not in the way that most people do, where they're kind of, hey, let's look under the hood together and see what's in this thing. No, that's not what we do. We lead with what I call the big solution, and help them see a path to change. And then, so if you get agreement on those three key elements in those introductory dialogues, or on your marketing site, for example, your website, get agreement across those dimensions, then the buyer can do some more deep, introspection, tire kicking, et cetera, and decide to move forward with you. But that's what you lead with: problem, outcome, solution.
So I really like chapter 6 as well. I find this with a lot of books, and I find it with a lot of brands. They don't really touch on what is really important. And I think you do a good job of explaining this, developing a set of prescribed next steps, and how important that is, because we get hit with so much information. It's a great idea, Bruce. Now, what do I do with it? And then, you sometimes have to lay that out. And I think you do a great job of talking about that. So if you will, elaborate on the importance of developing a set of prescribed next steps.
Thank you, Shark. Yeah, and I'm sure you've done this yourself, either concertedly or intuitively, knowing your experience in the world of marketing and sales. But for me, I kind of came to that epiphany, early on. Thank goodness. I got brought into a project between HP and Microsoft. And this project went all the way up to Steve Ballmer, owner of the Clippers and everything else in the world. But my most stressful project in my career. And what teased out of that project was me and my team. We were responsible for go-to-market stories for 8 different solution areas for between HP and Microsoft. And Mark Hurd and Steve Ballmer, they were going to make this the strategic partnership that's never been seen before, where you have this huge system integrator and software provider really tight at the hip going to market with these 8 solutions. So when I started working with each of the solution leaders, Shark, I was asking them, so, once we got the buyer convinced that they need to buy, what are the next steps? And most of the solution owners kind of hemmed and hawed. Well, we could do this, Bruce. And sometimes we do that. But it was kind of wishy-washy and muddled. And I'm like going, guys, not good enough. We really need to have some hard, concrete prescribed next steps for these buyers. And Shark, these were multi-million-dollar purchasing decisions. So I just believed in my heart they needed that to get it over the goal line. And just thank God I was given the remit to do this, and the solution leaders wanted to support it, wanted to be successful with these big bets. So we designed and hard coded these next steps, which was typically a business case, an assessment, a proof of concept, some reference checking, et cetera. But we got them, kind of hard coded for each of the 8 solutions. And not that the buyer had to do them, but we recommended those steps to help the buyer buy. And because of that, I won an award, and the HP people that were part of this, they won the Marketing Circle of Excellence Award for that year because it was a highly successful approach. Each buyer that started a selling conversation with us, over 50% of those buyers bought those multi-million-dollar decisions. So it was wildly successful.
Well, a French writer wrote this saying, a goal without a plan is just a wish. And so it's always been uber important for me to help get people into those next steps. Otherwise, it's a lot of fun conversation, but it goes nowhere. So
yeah, and I found, Shark, that you need to kind of build those next steps. It's not easy. It's not just a magic wand. I have to, what's that assessment look like? What are the dimensions of that assessment? Where's the benchmark data against that assessment? The business case, the ROI, what's that look like? Where's the proof around that? How are we going to convince a CFO that business case is valid, that it's worth investing in, and the return's going to be higher than that investment? So just, it might be nice to say, but I'd also say mastered by few. You really got to get that dialed in. That's a separate effort. Yeah.
Well, I love doodles in books, and you get some great doodles. And I thought it kind of reminded me of this question. The first one, when it's in the introduction, it's almost sort of a signal to me as a hand coming out of the water. There was another one where you were telling the story about your dad's boat, and there's a fin on top of the boat that you'll see. But it kind of goes back to one of the last chapters. Talk about the importance of communicating your narrative through simple, unforgettable visuals.
Oh, absolutely. Can I give credit where credit's due, Shark?
Sure.
I asked my wife to do those doodles for me. And that's, this book truly has been a family project, including, that story about me buying my 92-year-old dad's boat.
Off Craigslist, yeah.
Deferring to my smarter brother, who's never carried a sales bag. But anyways, the visuals were a joy. Yeah, no doubt about it. In the book, there's lots of stats in there around the power of visuals. And one of my really good friends, another pro in my lane, he speaks about Daniel Pink's book, Drive, if you've read that book, Drive. So he is a lover of organizational development and motivation. And he read that book multiple times. But where the light bulbs went off is when Animate, if you remember that outfit that used to animate books, they made like a 5-minute animation of the core of that book, and just light bulbs go off, because of that visual storytelling. So I try to do that with the teams that I serve. How can we visualize the problem that we're solving, the outcome that we're promising, and then the solution that we're delivering? How do we visualize that in a way that's incredibly compelling? And if we can do that, hey, 1,000 words can go away right like that. We've got a picture that's really going to help people get past their status quo bias. But doing that sounds simple. It's really hard. I'm working with an organization right now, the CEO's business. He's founder of it. They've been in business for 30 years and doing really well, but he wants to take it to the next level. Visualizing their story, it's hard. It's not easy. And Chat GPT hasn't solved that problem for us just yet. It's a challenge. And I normally start, Shark, just as a bit of wisdom for the listening audience is start by trying to visualize the problem. And typically when I start an engagement, I ask for, hey, are there any visualizations? Send me your slide deck, send me this and that, send me to your website, but send me to where I can see the problem you're solving. And typically that's just a loud, thud sound or a lot of silence when I ask that question to send me a picture of the problem. It typically does not exist. And that's where we need to begin. That's where we really start thinking it through and start to visualize, what's this problem perspective look like? And I think you saw in that chapter, I gave an example of some work that I did with McKesson Technology, where which was really great, getting the team together in a room and doing tons of doodling as a team. I love to get divergent thinking, so I typically get people into groups. And even with SAP, we did this virtually, global groups, but get people to visualize it, show me what they came up with in terms of that portrayal of the problem domain in a pictorial format, just doodling. And boy, that's really telling. And when we get that right, that can move mountains in terms of busting through that status quo bias.
Well, my compliments to you as well, other than just being a good thought-provoking book too, is you did it very concisely, and it doesn't take 6 weeks to read like some people's books have come out of recent that I don't have the patience anymore for, these books that I can't finish in a day or two.
Oh man, a guy in our chapter sent me a copy of his book, and I just saw it and I go, oh my goodness, this one is going to take a lot of work to get through. And it doesn't have to be that way. A lot of books, I think there were some rules, Shark. You probably know this really well, but a typical business book, nonfiction, was back in the day, probably 50 to 70,000 words. And in this modern era, I think that the common wisdom's between 25,000 and 50,000 words. I decided to kind of do something a little bit unconventional, but I know Jay Bears, I think, been on your podcast.
Oh,
he did the same thing where, I took mine down to 12,000, thinking I did mine kind of fast. And the narrated version of my book, Shark, is only an hour and a half. Jay even beat that. You don't have to go long-winded on these things to create the value. And we just buffed and buffed and buffed on this thing to make it readable in the course of a flight. Or one of my friends and CEO of his firm shot me a photo. He was out in France and he read my book in the course of a doctor's office visit. So I'm not expecting people to camp on this thing. And most people won't anyways. I wrote it so people could read it. That was my primary aim. Make it short and sweet.
Well, Bruce, I appreciate you also listening. And as you know, I ask everyone who appears on the show, and you do live off the Puget Sound. So where there are some waters, but what is your favorite kind of shark and why?
And can I tell you the story, Shark, and your listening audience? I'm a Chat GPT fan. I'm in that app, every day doing something with it, personally, for business, what have you. But I asked Chat GPT to help me with this question. What is my favorite shark? And I'm not Shark, and I don't have a podcast called The Shark's Perspective. So I needed help. And I just explained to ChatGPT, typically when you're doing a good prompt, you need to load it up. And I just said, hey, I'm an older sales and marketing consultant getting ready to go into a podcast as a guest. The host is going to ask me, what's your favorite shark? I don't know the answer. I do know I'm an entrepreneur, have written a best-selling book, have inspired thousands of sellers and marketers through my career, and love learning and different experiences. Can you ask me questions to help me determine what my favorite type of shark might be? And Chat GPT, it's getting so clever now, Shark. It's just getting better every day, but it responds like my best friend. Of course, let's dive in and find the perfect shark that aligns with your personality and experiences. So it kind of went through an entrepreneurial shark, an authorship type of shark, which happens to be a black tip reef shark, an inspiring shark, which might be a mako shark, a love of learning type of shark, which is the thresher shark, and then a unique experiences type of shark that might be the saw shark. And I'm like going, man, all these sound really cool. Could you take a guess for me, Chat GPT? I think my favorite one is the Shresher shark, because it's literally a cutting edge shark. It uses its tail to cut into other prey and does pretty good. And I like to try to be cutting edge myself. I'm at Consumer Electronics Show every year looking for the latest cutting edge technology. It's just a passion. And so Shark GPT, responds, ha ha, well played. Based on your profile as an innovative entrepreneur, your love of learning, and your appreciation for unique experiences, the Shresher shark does indeed seem to be like the fitting choice. Its unique tail, adaptability, and the innovative way it hunts represents qualities akin to groundbreaking entrepreneurs who stand out from the crowd. Embracing the Thresher shark as your favorite seems both apt and delightfully cutting edge. And then it follows on Shark with good luck on your podcast.
Well,
it's like chatting with my best friend. Amazing. A very kind best friend.
You told me about this right before we got on air, and Thresher Shark's a good choice, because I'm trying to remember if anybody else has used that. Now, they did leave out the hammerhead shark in the unique shark category, but Thresher sharks have that big tail. They basically use it like a whip, and I've only seen a few. You don't see a ton of them.
Wow.
But they're mackerel sharks, and they're large sharks and spend a lot of time in tropical waters, and they can flick that tail and knock a fish, silly, and then go get them. So that was fantastic.
Oh, I love it, Shark. In the work and back to the book, I love helping clients find their point of differentiation, and which many struggle so much to do. But that Thresher shark just seems so different as well, that, it really has a different angle to the problem.
Yeah. Well, Bruce, it's a special time of the show. You're ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today.
Oh, no. Now it's time to get me flat-footed. Okay, let's go.
All right. Number 1, because I watched your video on your site. That's good. Do you enjoy more riding your bike through the woods and the mountains, or riding your elliptical Stairmaster bicycle on the paddleboard that you use out on the water?
Oh man, tough choice. I would definitely, if I had to choose one, what do I like more if I was stuck on an island? Well, gosh, I got to rethink this one. The bike might not do me so well on the island. Maybe the elliptical paddleboard type of thing would do best. And I was telling you, I'd said, gosh, I can do a mile in 8 minutes, so I could probably even get to safety. But I love my bike. I travel with a bike, Shark.
Really?
Yeah, it's a folding bike, and I travel around the world with that thing and just love it. I'm trying to be healthy wherever I go, and when I'm traveling, there's rarely time to go to the gym and try to stay to my disciplines. But the bike really saves me. And I learned from David Byrne a long time ago. There's no better way to take on a new place in a new city and have more interesting experiences than from a bike. I just see things that people don't see. I see the homelessness. I see statues. I see weird stuff. Just a bike. I love it for having new experiences wherever I go.
Yeah, wherever I go, I try to go diving. So that's that's why I speak so much on the coast. All right. Number 2, talking about inspiring your buyers, and you also do some work as a speaker, but let's talk about who would be your favorite inspirational speaker in history, Tony Robbins or Les Brown? Which do you prefer?
I'm more exposed to Tony Robbins, and I've attended one of his events in Singapore back in the day.
Wow.
He had just come out with Awaken the Giant Within, and was on his circuit, And I respected him as a speaker so much. Of course, he had us jumping into the rafters in this huge Congress type thing. We were all going nuts over him, and he got us all riled up. Taylor Swift music. We're just going nuts. But the thing that probably impressed me the most was his ability to connect with Singaporeans on arrivals. He himself and probably his team did a bunch of research, and he was giving local stories and references and literally had the audience in the palm of his hand, probably within 5 minutes of being on stage, where everybody's just going, whoa, he gets us. And then he just took us on a ride, absolutely outstanding.
Well, and a few 100 million and a few gray hairs later, and he's still jumping up and down to Taylor Swift music, and he's still a Svengali with people. It's amazing. All right. Yeah. Number 3, let's say you're leaving, and let's say there was not a border to worry about crossing. Would you rather spend a day in Seattle, or would you rather spend a day in Vancouver?
Seattle is probably my first choice now. And the reason is, Shark, is because we have trolls, and I haven't seen any trolls up in Vancouver. I'm going to Vancouver tomorrow, by the way. But and I love it up there. But yeah, we've got an edge at this point in time. We've got trolls.
All right, number 4. You live on Vashon Island. Is that how to say it?
Vashon.
You live on Vashon Island.
Yeah.
If you could live on any other island in the world, where would it be?
Gosh, I've lived on a few islands. I lived on Oahu in Hawaii, lived in Singapore, an island state. Any other island? Oh, man. I'd probably head back over to Hawaii. My wife and I are heading there for a week in December, and I go back there every year. But I really love Hawaii.
That's
got
beautiful.
Friends back there, and yeah, I dig it.
All right, number 5 of them, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Cornbread, please.
I don't really know. I don't think about the Puget Sound and Southern delicacies like that. So wasn't sure what you would say.
Yeah, and it's unusual, and I only have it around family events, and yeah, no, it's a fun one.
All right, well, Bruce, where can people find out more about you, get a copy of this book, and so much more?
Oh, there's a few ways. I'd appreciate it if you want to go to the website, www.inspireyourbuyers.com. And if you're interested in this book or another book that I was featured in, another 2023 bestseller called, bashfully, The Most Amazing Marketing Book Ever, those 2 books can be found at www.inspireyourbuyers.com/books, where you'll see the books that I've been featured in this year. And I hang out on LinkedIn as well. So my first name's Bruce. It's B, last name Scheer. You'll find me on LinkedIn as well. And I'd love to connect with you and continue the conversation with you there.
All right. Well, they call him Bruce. And Bruce, thank you so much for being with us today.
The real Bruce.
Shark's perspective. The real Bruce.
Thank you, Shark.
So there was my conversation with Bruce Scheer, a professional speaker and president of NSA Northwest, a CEO of a consultancy, and the author of Inspire Your Buyers. Go to market with a story that sizzles. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, you can't afford to go to market twice. That was some great advice that someone once gave Bruce. You can refine your message throughout that story, but that go-to-market story happens only once. Your wallet likely won't stretch further, so whatever you do, think through that market message. Second, when you're designing a story, especially at big companies, there are a lot of opinions. Internal teams are tough to align, but then you throw in those extensions of your team, the agencies, and they've all got opinions, and it can become a mess trying to get everyone aligned with the same focus. The best way to narrow that target, though, is to test your target buyer. Bruce added, to not just focus on internal opinions and insular thinking. It's the buyer-back perspective, as he described it, that is the winner. Third, to see the success of the narrative imperative, Bruce said to leverage the sales team, the marketing team, and the product team. You've heard me speak about this on many shows. The more you integrate your story throughout all your teams, the better success your story will have. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time, and I am so thankful to everyone who listens. Today, I want you to find your story and make it sizzle. Just don't burn your finger. and join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.